Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today I'm revisiting my black-white clue token sacrifice deck, but this time I'm not going for the poison alternate win condition, which was a bit ambitious, and instead we're making room for a Rottenmouth Viper, which is perfect in a deck that can cheaply generate a lot of permanents, as we can get the Viper down at a discount, and then a 6/6 saying when it enters or attacks, put a blight counter on it. For each blight counter on it, the opponent has to either lose 4 life, sacrifice a non-land permanent, or discard a card, so those counters can pretty quickly add up, and then the Viper can close out the game rather quickly. How can we generate clue tokens? Well, Obsessive Pursuit is the easiest way to do so, making a clue each turn at the cost of 1 life, and it also has the added upside of potentially giving our attacking creatures additional +1 counters if we've sacrificed a number of permanents in our turn. If we get to 3 or more, that creature also gains a lifelink until end of turn, so that can also be pretty powerful, especially if we have some random 1-mana creature in play that gets to attack in the same turn where we maybe sacrificed a whole bunch of clues to cast the Rottenmouth Viper. A Novice Inspector, for instance, would get to attack and then pick up a ton of +1 counters and gain us some life back to offset the life loss from the pursuit. Inspector, a very cheap way to generate 2 permanents to maybe sacrifice to a Viper. There's also the Callous Inspector, doesn't make a clue when it enters, but makes one when it dies, and also has Menace, so also maybe pretty good alongside the Obsessive Pursuit if we're actually attacking and adding more +1 counters on it. Then we also have the Tolls of War, which when it enters makes a clue, and then whenever we sacrifice a permanent during our turn, we get to make a 1/1 ally token, although only triggers once each turn. Still a pretty good source of random permanents again to sacrifice to the Viper and to maybe help play defense. Then the Umbral Caller Zealot, also left over from the previous build, a great way to sacrifice a ton of our clue tokens without having to spend 2 mana to draw a card, so that can be another great way to set up our Obsessive Pursuit to massively pump up our creatures, especially if we have multiples in play. And then rounding out the deck, I'm also playing the full set of Raven Eagle, as this gives us main deck Graveyard Hate for some of the Graveyard combo decks, while still generating additional clue tokens. We're also actively sacrificing our own creatures, especially the 1-drops, so those can also end up in the graveyard to fuel the Eagle. And if we maybe sacrifice the clue and draw on a second card, this will also drain the opponent for 1 while gaining 1 life. And then we also need a bit of removal, going for the full set of Nowhere to Run, as it's an enchantment that stays in play and is a permanent we can also sacrifice to the Rottenmouth Viper. This also ignores Ward and Hexproof going forward, which is also pretty relevant if you're up against the mono-white Aura deck that has a bunch of Ward abilities, including Sheltered by Ghosts. And this can also come in handy against the blue-green Kona combo decks, where they might have Lost in the Labyrinth as a way to protect Kona, giving it hexproof when tapped. Now with Nowhere to Run, we can still answer it, so it is pretty versatile, but also has its limitations. If you're trying to take out Uruboroid, you have to keep up 2 mana to take it out before it gets a +1 counter, otherwise it may be too late. But that's also why we have 2 Tragic Trajectories, which I've added as kind of a late addition, can early on give a creature -2/-2, so still effective against random mana elves or red aggro creatures. But then later in the game, if we've sacrificed a clue token or some other permanent, we can give a creature -10/-10 instead, so that can still deal with a larger Uruboroid, for instance. And then Soul Guide Lantern can be effective against all the graveyard strategies, mainly the Kivero decks, but can also come in handy against blue-red Lessons. And it's still an artifact we can play early and maybe sacrifice for 1 mana to draw a card, so it can still help set up our pursuit, or can be a permanent we just end up sacrificing to the Rottenmouth Viper, so that can also come in handy. And then the mana base could run a lot of utility lands. I'm just going for the Air Temple, which will often enter untapped, can also activate to give the team an additional +1 counter, and then the Realm can make additional Spirit tokens, so that can also be decent in the grindier matchups. Other options include the black-white creature land, although the fact that it enters tapped can seriously hurt us. At least these will often enter untapped, thanks to our 6 basics and 4 Fabled Passage, which can also get our basic lands. Fabled Passage also a way for us to maybe enable the Tolls of War to make a 1/1 token, and can also give us an extra counter with the Obsessive Pursuit, so that can be especially relevant if we need to get to 3 counters for the lifelink, so we usually want to hang on to Fabled Passage if possible. And then Godless Shrine, Concealed Court, Courtyard and Bleachbone Verge, so black-white has pretty good mana fixing. Could also play Fountain Port as another land that kind of ties into the whole token and sacrifice theme, but of course it is colorless, so you're not going to be able to cast some of your more color-intensive spells with it. But yeah, for now, let's jump in some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand is missing a white land on turn 1 for Novice Inspector, but we can get a Plains and then we're probably fine. Gotta hope Nowhere to Run's decent in the matchup. If not, our hand's not amazing. Passage on black. Could be a graveyard deck. Alright, in which case Soul Guide Lantern's good to have. And of course the Eagle as well. Yeah, I'll run it out here. Just to be mana efficient. May want to just cycle it if they're not on a graveyard strategy. I see Badger Mole Cup, so the black-green variant. So they'll have Ouroboros, some removal. But I've got a decent answer lined up. Just gonna answer the cub itself. So now there's food for the Eagle. Ascension is next. Possible I wanna keep Nowhere to Run available to answer an Ouroboros if that shows up. Because once it gets a counter, it's too late. Another Lantern, and a Pursuit. Now that I drew Pursuit, I'm more in favor of keeping up Nowhere to Run. And if they don't play something like Ouroboros, I can always sack a Clue. Does mean I missed out on a +1 counter, but that's alright. Yep. Well, and that's why we kept it available. Possible they have another one in hand, since they kind of forced the issue here. So what's my best approach? I could play Eagle, exile Ouroboros. I could go Tolls of War, sack a Clue, make a token. I really want to get to a point where I can sack 3 things in one turn. I guess for now I'll go Tolls, sack a Clue. Try and hit a land. And then I can still play a Lantern, exile my own Lantern, I guess, since we want to leave creatures in the graveyards. And attack. So another Ouroboros is still going to be problematic. But I can try to chum block on the ground with our 1/1 tokens while maybe flying over and pumping the Eagle. Another Ascension. Okay. Gets another Swamp. Take my turn. Okay, so I'm gonna play the Eagle. Could sack a Clue first, maybe that changes my decision. I don't think it does. And then I'm just sending in the Inspector. Next turn I should be able to give lifelink to something. A land comes back, triggers landfall, so yeah, those +1 counters are going to start getting out of hand. And especially if they do have another Ouroboros in hand, that could be bad for me. The Siege makes sense if they're going for +1 counter synergy. At least only triggers once each turn. The Ascension also gives trample, so jumping is not going to be the best solution. So yeah, we're kind of all in on this eagle, hoping it doesn't get removed. Opponent's hanging back. And another pursuit. So we've got some interesting options. I could play another pursuit and then sack 2 clues and sack Lantern just to give 2 creatures a whole bunch of counters. But I can start by sacking a clue first. Ooh, Zealot, that's even better. So then now go Pursuit into Zealots. And can I present lethal? So we've already sacked 1 thing. I can sack 5, 6 times 2 is 12. And that's just game if they don't have anything. And I don't think they do. And then we can dig for, not sure what at this point. A Viper would be decent, I guess. I'm just sacking to get more counters from Pursuit. Normally it would make sense to spread out the counters a little bit. But since they have blockers back, I'm just going to go for the Flyer. Could also sack an ally for what it's worth. Still counts for Pursuit. Attack. And yeah, that's the power of Umbral Color Zealot in this deck. Giving you a lethal out of nowhere. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. Lots of ways to get the Viper out quickly. Between Pursuit and Tools of War. Got a bit of graveyard hate for the graveyard combo strategies. Start with Pursuit, hope to draw a land so we can double spell next turn. Passage on blue in the meantime, now blue-red. Opponent's looking at my land, so this is probably just a lesson deck. And accumulate wisdom. Okay, so we know what we're up against. The Eagle exiling lessons from the graveyard could also come in handy. And I could even consider playing a Viper now, although I would have to give up on the Pursuit itself, which is probably not worth it. So let's go Tools of War into Inspector. And then next turn I can get the Viper down. I'll get to trigger Tools as well as Pursuit to grow the Inspector, so that's actually relevant. Although they're somewhat likely to have a burn spell for the Inspector itself. Best case scenario, they tap out for a Monument, I guess. Alright. Now they do get to trigger the Monuments, interestingly enough, if they discard to the Viper's ability. But yeah, we can do some serious damage. So I could even sack 5 clues to get 5 counters from Pursuit. And then maybe I get the Eagle down as well to exile the Wisdom. Or I can play another Tools of War to make 2 1/1s. That might be better. Although I'm still tempted to just sack 5 things to grow Inspector as much as possible. Even though I could just sack 4 things. Yeah, let's go for maximum damage. I guess the one downside here of Monument making a treasure is that they could still remove the Inspector before it gets a chance to actually attack. So we'll see if they make a treasure and have a Firebending lesson. Yeah, they might actually have it. So then I'll regret sacking the extra clue. Yep. Alright, so that did not quite pan out. Missed out on 6 damage, and of course a huge creature as well. So they have 3 lessons in graveyard, so Technique could deal 5. So 2 lessons could deal with the Viper. So then I might regret not going for the Eagle to exile the extra lesson. Yeah, and they might have it actually here. Maybe just a Boomerang Basics to bounce the Viper. Alright, get to untap. Find another Eagle. Yeah, I don't think there's really a point in main phasing that. Let's go to attacks. And yeah, they had the technique. That's rough. Of course, if I go for Eagle, they just respond. Probably too late to try and fight the graveyard. Let's make a clue. Yeah, I might have missequenced slightly in the early turns. Maybe if I go Eagle earlier, then Viper survives. And this is why they were looking at my lands early on. They had a Price of Freedom. I guess it enters tapped, so I can't sack a clue here. Probably seeing main deck play to answer opposing monuments. At least they don't have an Artist's Talent to go with it, and now without the Viper enabling it for them, they don't have a discard outlet necessarily. Another monument. And a Zealot was a good draw. I think I still start by... well, I could go Zealots, sack, Surveil, and then draw to improve my draw step. But if I draw... well, what would I draw that changes my play? Can't actually think of much. So may as well do this first. And a land is fine. So now I can draw, play the lands, and then I want to sack a third thing for the pursuit. Could also make it a token, because I have Iro's Demonstration to deal 1 to everything. Don't think I need Fabled Passage, although it can help with Pursuit as well. And I guess we've got a whole bunch of clues to work with. And then I should probably grow the bird. Or actually, growing the 1/1 might make more sense in the face of Iro's Demonstration. And then we'll get rid of a lesson. Opponent's at 6. So, yeah, next turn I could maybe present lethal if I get to keep some of my sacrifice synergies. The lesson deck is pretty bad at answering enchantments, so that's a big upside here of Obsessive Pursuit and Tools of War. Right, bounce the token with the basics, can sack it in response. Although, do I still keep Fabled Passage? It seems alright, I can just manually sack 3 clues. Right, opponent had a technique as well. That's fine. Still gonna keep the land. So they're down to 1 card in hand. So Fabled Passage, fetch. That's 1 permanent sacrificed. Make tokens with Tools of War. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up, alright. So yeah, despite answering the early Viper, we still managed to get there. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have Graveyard Hate aplenty. Can I be up against the Kevero deck one time? Otherwise, this hand's a little lackluster, I believe. I'm gonna go turn 1 Lantern and the opponent's gonna concede. Plains Authority. Alright, not the matchup I was hoping for. So, Tools of War. Could sack Lantern just to make a 1/1. I don't think that's worth it. So blue-white Synthesizer. This is probably one of our worst matchups, since they can kind of go over the top. Their removal can exile all my artifacts and tokens, Probably go for the Eagle here. Yeah, we kind of need to try and set up some one-hit KO with Obsessive Pursuit and Zealot, but that just doesn't play well in the face of their Star Cage. So, doesn't seem to be a great sequence for us. There's a Synthesizer on 3. On bottom at least. Alright, so going for another Eagle at least doesn't run into Star Cage. So I can start by drawing, making a 1-1. Probably should have played Eagle first actually, just to get the extra trigger from drawing my second card. Another Synthesizer. Yeah, that's scary. Can try and chum block with ally tokens, but only to an extent. If I attack, they're not going to block, I assume. So then it's just going to be Tolls of War, sack a clue. Make some more 1-1s. Eagles can attack. I'm gonna jump. Probably gonna see Star Cage, or Battlefront could hit a Star Cage. Authority plus Repurposing Bay, so yeah, still pretty good. And now Viper. Viper's interesting. So what's my sequence? I can sack a clue to trigger Eagle, make 2 1-1s, so I have more things to sack to the Viper. Although Authority is going to gain them a lot of life here. And I probably don't actually want to sack the 1-1s since I need them back as blockers. I think I do want to draw just to trigger the Eagles. Maybe find an Obsessive Pursuit, another Viper. Can play both this turn. I guess I just sank the 1-1s. And then Repurposing Bay next turn can sack Relic, get another 3-drop. Which is probably another Synthesizer, although they could get an answer to the Viper if they care about it. Yeah, my only hope is some sort of Obsessive Pursuit, pumping the Eagles. Opponent gets another Repurposing Bay, so I guess they're going for Fire Crystal here for haste, and that should be game. Yep. Alright, GG's. Not much we could have done, but yeah, as I've said, this is a pretty bad matchup. Kept the hand hoping to play against a graveyard deck, so that did not quite pan out. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Turn 1 Inspector, turn 2 Tolls. Facing red-black. Would love to be up against a Reanimator deck with double Eagle and Lantern. For now, Pursuit. And Saheeli's Lattice, so yeah, I think we got our wish here. Opponent discards Trumpeting Carnosaur. Could not get the third land, unfortunately. But I think I go... Well, it's actually interesting. I just want to hit my land drop. Opponent could technically use the Swamp Visions to get back Carnosaur next turn, which would be a reason to play the Lantern. I can sack it to try and hit my land drop, get a +1 counter. Yeah, their discard effects are mostly sorcery speed, outside of, I guess, Bitter Triumph. So I'm just debating whether or not it's worth it to keep the Lantern in play or sacrifice it. I mean, I could also hit a land and then still play Lantern afterwards, which would be the best case scenario. But really just want to get the Eagle in play, so I could not get the land. But next turn I absolutely need to get some Graveyard Hate in play. Melded Moxide is next. And the Polanyi's Hatcher, so yeah, now they're fully setting up for Swamp Vision. Now I could play the Eagle. It's not quite as backbreaking as Soul Guide Lantern, because I could still Swamp Visions and get one creature back if I play the Eagle here. But long term, of course, it's nice to have the Eagle in play. I think I should just go for Lantern. They can't really beat me as long as I keep it in play. And then Hatcher is scarier since it gives everything haste. Can sack a Clue or play Tolls of War. Let's sack a Clue. Try and hit some more land drops. And then next turn we can play Eagle while still having a Lantern available, which is the safest. Alright, opponent's still going for the Swamp Visions here. So Carnosaur does go away end of turn. So their best case scenario is hitting a Polanyi's Hatcher. Otherwise there's nothing too scary they can find. And Hatcher we can know where to run. So I'll let that happen. It's not threatening enough for me to want a Lantern. Opponent hit a Moxide. Because yeah, it's not like the Carnosaur has haste here, so it doesn't even get to attack. Opponent discards another Hatcher. Alright, so that wasn't too bad. And then now we get to play Eagle, exile Hatcher, and our opponent's going to be pretty sad. Can add Inspector to the board as well. So now I just need to make sure I don't lose to them hardcasting their dinosaurs. Although they usually don't have the mana for it, outside of maybe the 5-mana Hatcher. Yeah, unfortunately the dinosaur deck is catching some strays from people being tired of losing to the Kivero decks. And of course Lantern and Eagle can also be effective against the Lesson decks. Mostly the Lantern, Eagle can be a little slow. Possible they have some sweepers in the deck as well. Bitter Triumph discarding Voltborn Tyrant, fair enough. That works. But I've got bad news. Tap lands and Moxide. Okay, take my turn. Another Lantern. Let's run this back. Exile your Tyrants. Play another Lantern. Might actually be a mistake if they somehow have a way of dealing with all my artifacts. Although, at least Brotherhood's End is no longer in Standard. Opponent's at 7, so next turn they should be dead. And yeah, hardcast Carnosaur as we suspected. If they discover a Hatcher, that would be pretty good, but still survivable. Get to take my turn. And let's see, 5, 6. So I can double nowhere to run the... Well, I guess I don't even have to since these have Menace. So I can just sack a couple of Clues. Trajectory could also deal with the Carnosaur. Although, yeah, the plan was going to be to just sacrifice another clue, maybe even a lantern, so I can also gain lifelink if I wanted to. So yeah, we had most angles covered. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a hand that could use some more sacrifice fodder for Rottenmouth, but I'll try it. So any of our 2-mana enchantments would be great. Vote on the red-whites and drew a land. So probably just going to play the lantern and not sacrifice it yet. And then next turn I have the option of playing a Viper. Which, against red-white, if there's some sort of burn deck, could be decent. Since they may not have enough burn to take it out. Let's try it. If they're a Jeskai control deck with a Get Lost, then they can immediately take it out, but we'll see. Opponent took the damage. And it's a Swordmaster with Offspring, so yeah, no immediate answer to the Viper, although my draws have not been particularly exciting. Want to hang on to Fabled Passage, since that can potentially synergize with Obsessive Pursuit. So our opponent falls to 10, falls to 4. They probably have a Sheltered by Ghosts in hand, which can now answer the Viper. I would need to draw Nowhere to Run to answer their creature. Yep. Well, that's a type of card that can turn a game around for sure. Take 5. And that's a land. Well, some games you're not meant to win. I imagine they can close it out in 2 turns. Yeah, their hand might have more copies of Sheltered by Ghosts if they're being this passive. Another Swordmaster. And another land. Well, at least this land has an activated ability. Alright, so if they can target their creature here, we should be pretty dead. Possible they're afraid of a sweeper, and they're confused as to why I haven't cast anything. Shard Mage's Rescue. Again, Nowhere to Run would get around Hexproof and Ward. So this is an attack for 10. Fall to 2. And a Sellsword was kind of unexpected here, but yeah, fair enough. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a functional hand. Inspector into Pursuit. A Lantern for graveyard decks, whether it's Gavero or the Lessons deck. And black-green. So more of a mid-range deck, most likely. So then Pursuit's still good, but I may need some answers to Badger Moles or Ouroboros. It's gonna be the Merchant. Interesting way to ramp. I guess it's also decent alongside Rottenmouth Viper, since it's 2 permanents for 2 mana. Scavenger's Talent, so yeah, this might be a Viper deck for all we know. And they're gonna take out the Inspector. Fair enough. Another Lantern. Probably gonna cycle one of them here. Can maybe draw into another 1-drop. Want to hang on to Fabled Passage for Pursuit. And I can play another Lantern or just play tap lands. Got a few Godless Shrines, my life total could matter. Alright. More food synergy. And now an Eagle. I do have an Inspector I can exile with it. Could be alright. And then maybe go for another Godless Shrine. And then next turn with Fabled Passage and maybe 2 clues, I could pump up the Eagle, give it lifelink. Opponent levels up the talents. Might do some self-milling. And Gret also has 2 abilities. But for now they're keeping up some mana. Is it possible they have removal for the Eagle lined up? Still down to go Inspector, sack 2 clues. Alright, Viper's a good one. So, do I still need to Fabled Passage? I'll probably have enough sacrifices this turn already. So, that's probably overkill. Can help enable the Pursuit next turn. A Viper enters. We'll see if Eagle gets answered. It does. No, just -2/-2. Savor. Opponent's definitely playing a very thematic food deck here. Hollow Scavenger. Possible they're going for one of the achievements to sack a bunch of food, who knows. It is fun to see 2 non-meta decks go at it. And yeah, opponents got their own Rottenmouth Viper. Well, at least these decks are pretty well set up to sack a bunch of permanents. And the Eagle next turn should be able to cross a finish line. Hoping I have a basic left to fetch. But yeah, just fetching and sacking 2 clues is already lethal with the Eagle. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a functional hand. Turn 1, probably just gonna fetch, so this enters untapped. Not in a hurry to play the Inspector. Or the Lantern for that matter. So we'll get a Swamp. Opponent on a green, probably Badger Mole deck. Okay, so turn 2 Pursuit. Green-white with a turn 2 Cub. Do not have an answer lined up. So yeah, this turn, what are my options? Tools of War plus Inspector probably. Could also technically sack Lantern just to make a 1/1. Doesn't seem worth it. Next turn I can sack Passage, plus 2 clues, so then I could give the Inspector lifelink. But if they have a turn 3 Ouroboros, I'm probably going to be too far behind. It's going to be Bramble Familiar, so they keep on ramping. Take 2. Ooh, Viper was a good one. So now still going for Fabled Passage to get an extra counter. And then I can sack 1 clue manually, perhaps. So let me start by fetching. If I sack one manually, I'll still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Seems alright. Trigger Viper, and then Inspector grows up to a 7/7 Menace lifelink. So that's a good bit of pressure. We're back up to 20. And then at the very least, sacking Lantern gives us another 1/1. And another counter. Can our opponent cast Craterhoof Behemoth yet? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they can, but it would not be lethal. It would hit for 17 total. So they're actually getting close. So for now, Frenzied Baloth and Pollinator. Okay. So start with maybe sacking the Clue. Activating Air Temple was also an option, but this seems a little bit better. Find another Lantern. So I can play one. And then just sacrifice it to draw. And Inspector is an option, or I can just play Lantern, sack it, just so I can get Lifelink of Pursuit again. Make this a 9/9, so they can't trade for it as easily. Or I can keep putting more counters on Inspector so we gain more life. Kind of like going for the Viper here. Yeah, I just need maximum pressure. I can't afford to let them keep their permanents and a Craterhoof in hand, because otherwise they could still kill me next turn. So I'm hoping this forces them to give way, at least in some aspect. I'll be gaining 9 up to 28. So their opponent got rid of Cage and Ademi. So they could still have a hoof in hand. They have to chump Viper, they can take 7. If they're chumping with Familiar, they maybe don't have Craterhoof in hand here, who knows. But if they're going for Cage, they must have Craterhoof. Alright, I see. Bramble Familiar picked up, discarding Craterhoof. So that prevented the life gain, and then now they're hoping to find Craterhoof with a fetch quest. Yeah, that was a pretty neat interaction. So if I wanted to guarantee the life gain, I should have targeted the Inspector once again. But we got lucky and dodged the Craterhoof. So now our opponent's in trouble. Yeah, I wonder if there was a better sequence for the opponent there. They probably did the math and figured out that this was their best bet. But it did not quite pan out. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a functional hand. Facing a red aggro, okay. So definitely gonna just trajectory here. That's the upside of trajectory over the removal spells that require you to sacrifice an artifact or creature. Being able to just use it right away. Double Inspector, and then, yeah, next turn I could play a Viper. Against red, Viper is pretty good since they typically don't have any clean answers. Some versions, if they're splashing white, could have Sheltered by Ghosts. So that could be more annoying. But yeah, opponent shocking the Inspector means I may be one permanent short. Opponent plots a Slick Shot, drew the land. So Viper versus Eagle is now the question. Eagle's still pretty good here. Can also block a slick shots, makes a clue right away. And then next turn I can get a Viper down after making another clue, perhaps. They do have Sheltered by Ghost, as it turns out. So I'm glad we didn't go for Viper, but yeah, that card's annoying. Gotta hope to draw nowhere to run. Otherwise, I could try another Eagle first, since it does block. I'm not gonna win a race against Slick Shot even with a Viper, I don't think. So this one's tough. I mean, I could try Viper, sacking 3 clues. See where that leads us. Alright, hopefully they don't have a second. Boros Charm going face. Am I dying here? Not quite. So Viper attacks. Play Eagle. Take it from there. Could leave the Inspector back in case of haste creatures on the ground. Put on discarding a card. Okay, so play Eagle. Can exile Challenger or my own Inspector. We'll go with their creature. Now I can shock myself to 4 to draw, which would trigger Eagle and gain a life, so it would end up at 5. Versus just playing this tapped, staying at 6. I guess I still survive even if they remove Eagle and pump this for 2. So I guess I will draw the card. Okay. 2 cards in hand. They give up on Emberheart Challenger, so presumably they have more spells in hand. And the Lightning Helix means we're at least falling to 1. And a Zealot. Zealot does not keep me alive, but if I attack, opponent has to potentially lose 12. They could discard a card, lose 8. Plus another 6 is 14, and then we've got another Viper incoming. So then, yeah, hopefully we force them to sack the Slick Shot. They could still top deck a burn spell for the win. Are they gonna sack Sheltered by Ghost, perhaps? Alright, opponent gives up on Slick Shot, so now it's mostly burn spells I'm worried about. At 1 life. I mean, we still go to damage here. Opponent's at 7. So I can sack this, gain a life. Be at 2. I don't think that's a big difference, 1 or 2 life. So then I may as well go for another Viper here. There's nothing in my deck that will gain me life besides another Eagle, which I won't be able to trigger. So just trying to make sure there's nothing else I can do here. Yeah, I can't think of any 1 damage effects. It would have to be like their Lizard, but again, doesn't have haste. I guess they could have the land to give it haste. I guess I'll sack this anyway. Find the Tolls of War. So I can play this, play Zealots. Because yeah, I don't think Viper does anything. Opponent can lose 4, fall to 2. That doesn't matter. Unless maybe a shock land's involved. And I could still sack a clue to make a 1/1. Alright, that's all I've got. Let's see if we're dead. Bolt Wave. Alright, GG's. So we got to see this black-white sacrifice deck in action. Not the most powerful deck in Standard for sure, so I would not recommend it for the ranked ladder. There's just too many decks that are way too explosive, and if you don't draw the perfect answers at the right time, you're just gonna fall too far behind. especially in best of 1. In best of 3, things might be a little bit better since you can adapt the sideboard to have more creature removal against all the green decks and more graveyard interactions for the graveyard decks, so that sort of balances out. And then, yeah, your 2-mana enchantments aren't super easy for the opponent to deal with. They can provide a lot of value over the course of a long game, so that's where the deck really shines. But yeah, for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.